What up, y'all? It's your boy Lil Mill, and we are back with another reaction. Today we got what exactly happened on Artemis 2. Now, for those of y'all that have been sleeping under a rock, um, we sent some astronauts to go not land on the moon, but check on the moon. I guess I'm not too sure what exactly happened. That's why we're watching this video, so we can get further information what exactly happened. Because I'll be honest, I knew they were going. I knew there were some astronauts there that were gonna go outer space. I just didn't know what was the mission. So the mission was called Artemis 2, I think. Yeah, it was called Artemis 2. So this video is gonna explain to us what exactly happened. So hey, I'm kind of curious. You know, there's something different. There's something different from what I usually react to. But I'm curious. So hey, let's not waste no more time. Let's get into it. Come on. Okay. Yeah, I know what I gotta do. Yeah, I know what I gotta do. All right, come on. Okay, you see right there, and then there you go. All right, let go. Make
At
sure.
6:35 p.m. local time on April 1st, 2026, NASA's Space Launch System rocket lifted off from the Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida, marking the first time
Oh,
that a crew of people has departed the Earth to visit our moon in over 53 years. The launch itself
I actually have heard that. I heard that we haven't visited the moon in like over 50 years. But damn, I wonder why though.
went about as smoothly as these things get. There was one brief and minor concern in the minutes leading up to the scheduled launch time.
Oh
Ground
damn.
crews were a little concerned about readings from the flight termination system, what they call the FTS. It's basically a string of explosives that are rigged up to the main fuel tank of the rocket, and they act as a self-destruct mechanism if the booster was to ever lose control for any reason as it flies through the air. So the crew would abort from their
What?
capsule
That's crazy. Hold on. I think it's about to explain more.
would fly away, then the entire rocket would explode before it posed any risk of falling on people. So it's the kind of system that you hope not to use, but you definitely want it to work properly if the need ever comes up. That little bit of chatter around the FTS delayed the launch by just a few minutes from the
Damn.
opening of the flight window at 6:24 p.m. But the issue was quickly resolved when the ground crew realized that they just had a faulty sensor reading and the system itself was actually working just fine.
Damn, I ain't gonna lie. Imagine y'all as an astronaut and y'all gotta take off at a certain time, right? And y'all don't take off at that time, and y'all notice there's some sort of fault. How would y'all react, bro? I ain't gonna lie, bro. I'd be shitting my pants, bro. Like, I'd be terrified. I want to get out. I want to get off the spaceship, man. What the hell, man? Yo, them few minutes probably felt long for them astronauts. You know what I'm saying? Because probably they're nervous that like, oh, like may abort, like mission might be aborted. Like, you know, the mission might be canceled, which obviously it wasn't. But luckily, it didn't turn out to be nothing. It was just a sensor.
This came as a pleasant surprise to anyone who had been following the troubled journey of NASA's most powerful rocket, the SLS, probably best known for being over budget and behind schedule. This particular stack had given NASA problems earlier in the year when it started leaking hydrogen during a system test in February. Then after that was fixed, it started leaking helium a few days later,
Damn.
which led NASA to rolling the vehicle back into their assembly building, where it was taken apart and put back together and finally returned to the launch pad to await its crew. Of the 4 people on board NASA's moon rocket, 3 are American astronauts: Mission Commander Reed Wiseman, Pilot Victor Glover, and Mission Specialist Christina Cook.
Wow.
They are joined by Canadian Space Agency Mission Specialist Jeremy Hansen, the
Oh wow. Okay. They had a Canadian astronaut in the crew. Okay.
first Canadian to participate in a crewed moon mission. But he's not the only international contribution
there
to
was
the
a fly.
Artemis program. The service module attached below the crew capsule that provides power, propulsion, and life support was actually made in Germany under a contract from the European Space Agency. This was reflected in the name that the crew chose for their spacecraft, Integrity, a nod to the integrated nature of the vehicle.
I heard about that. I think that was the crew's name, Integrity. I think it was their name.
The rocket and entire Artemis program, with teams from across the USA and around the world working together to make this mission possible. And within seconds of booster ignition, the Integrity and her crew rose into a clear blue sky above the Florida coast, riding the most powerful rocket NASA has ever launched.
Wow.
8.5 minutes into the flight, at an altitude of about 100 miles above the surface, the booster engines were shut down and the spacecraft was released into Earth orbit. From here, the Integrity is still connected to the upper stage of the SLS, which is a single rocket engine capable of raising the spacecraft to an altitude of about 43,500 miles above the surface. After reaching this high Earth orbit about 1 hour into flight, this is where the crew took a bit of a pause on their trip to the moon to conduct a full systems check of their spacecraft. This is only the second time that an Orion series capsule has flown, and the first one to carry people on board, so the idea is to make sure that everything is working properly before committing to the moon. And there were some issues reported by the crew during this time. The first and probably most unfortunate was a problem with the Universal Waste Management System, which is a fancy way to say
the toilet. What
this
happened?
was supposed to be one of the biggest upgrades for a modern crew traveling to the moon. The old Apollo guys just had to do their business in plastic bags, while the new spacecraft is equipped with a full bathroom stall. Turns out a problem with the suction fan stopped the pee hose from working properly, but the space toilet was still functional for the number 2, so for number 1, astronauts had to resort to something called the collapse contingency urinal, which is a fancy way to say peeing in a bag. The only other problem they experienced was...
Golly, bro. Y'all can't even... Come on, man. How much y'all invest? How much did the government invest on this spaceship? Y'all telling me y'all couldn't get that fixed, man? Like, bro, that spaceship probably cost millions of dollars. I mean, I guess out of everything, if there was gonna be a defect on something on the spaceship, probably the toilet is the most, like, smallest, like, I don't know, smallest defect on the spaceship. But damn, man, they had to pee in bags? Shh. Man, luckily, like the guy said, they were able to do the number 2, but not. Imagine they weren't able to do the number 2. That spaceship be stinking, I ain't gonna lie.
Was an IT issue with their Microsoft Outlook email. Apparently, the crew got 2 official NASA accounts and they couldn't log into either of them. This will come as no surprise to anyone who's ever worked in a Microsoft Teams office. But with all of that out of the way, in the evening of April 2nd, ground crews unanimously voted to clear Integrity for a translunar injection burn. This is when they fired the main engine on the European Service Module to transition from an orbit around the Earth to a trip around the moon. After completing the burn, the spacecraft is committed to a very specific path known as the free return trajectory. It's the most efficient way to get from the Earth to the moon and then back again because it uses gravity from the 2 bodies to handle most of the steering. As they approach the moon, its gravity will naturally sling them around the far side and throw the ship back the way it came, at which point gravity from the Earth will take over and begin to pull them back home. This makes for a relatively slow trip, so the crew stayed busy by turning their cameras back toward the Earth. These are the first high-resolution digital images that show our entire planet.
Golly, what the fuck? This is our planet, man. Yo, they were able to take pictures. Bro, this is 4K. This is literally 4K. Damn, I wonder what camera they use, but damn. That's a nice picture. What's this over here? Is this, shit, I don't know. Is this Africa? I don't know. Shit, I don't know what it is, but damn. I wonder what's going on over here. It's a lot of clouds over here. That's a nice picture, man.
Digital images that show our entire planet in one frame.
Wow.
Most photographs that you see of Earth are composites, meaning they had to take a bunch of different photos and stitch them together to show the entire globe. That's because anything in a typical Earth orbit is just too close to see the entire thing. This photograph, which is now titled Hello World, was taken with a wide-angle lens on a Nikon D5 camera on April 3rd at a distance of about 100,000 miles
what
into
the
space.
Fuck?
You can see the first light of the sun just...
Yo, it's crazy how technology advanced, man. Wow. What's this? Is this the sun? Is that what you said?
And miles into space. You can see the first light of the sun just beginning to
Oh,
peek out over
okay,
the
okay.
horizon. So the light that we're seeing on the Earth itself is actually reflecting off the moon and filling in the night side of the planet. The scene would have looked much darker to the naked eye, but it's brought to life by the Nikon D5's unique ability to capture detail images in extremely low light situations.
What y'all think? Y'all think it's a real picture, or y'all think it's Photoshop or AI? You know, nowadays you never know, man. You really don't know.
The Earth grew smaller in their windows. The crew of Integrity would spend Saturday and Sunday running tests and experiments on board the ship as they prepared for the main event, the lunar flyby. What separates Artemis II from every Apollo moon mission is the distance they will cover. At their furthest point from Earth, the crew reached a distance of over 252,000 miles, further than any person has ever traveled from home. This gives them a very unique perspective on the moon itself because at an altitude of about 4,000 miles, they get to see the entire thing fill their spacecraft windows. It's kind of like if you held a basketball out at the end of your arm. That's how big the moon would appear to the eyes of the crew.
Wow.
The guys on Apollo orbited the moon at a much lower altitude, just a few hundred miles, so they could only ever see one small area at a time, and they were always circling around the equator of the moon, so they never had a clear view of the polar regions. Now, during their approach to the moon, the crew was able to spot two previously unidentified craters on the surface. And this is kind of the emotional heart of the entire mission. One of those new craters was proposed to be named Integrity to commemorate this mission and the vehicle that carried them there. The second is a bright spot crater that lies right on the boundary between the near and far side. This one was proposed to be named Carol, after Reed Wiseman's late wife, who passed away in 2020. Those bright spots were one of the first really interesting observations made by the crew. These fresh impacts kick up light-colored dust from just below the surface and stand out against the dull gray of the moon. Christina Cook noted that these are so bright they kind of look like holes poked in a map shade. And this is the kind of observation that is so important from Artemis II. Even with a really great digital camera, there is still a lot of nuance that only the human eye can see. Our eyes perceive a much greater dynamic range between dark and bright than any camera sensor. And we also see a lot more color. Here's an illustration of that. The big curving shape is the entire visible color spectrum, and that triangle inside is the small fraction that can fit into a digital image. So while the photographs still have incredible value, the most unique data from Artemis II is the first-person accounts of the astronauts as they describe what they see on the moon with their own eyes. For example, the crew noted that the moon is not actually as gray as it appears from Earth. They saw distinct hues of brown and even a faint green in some of the impact crater regions. As
Damn, bro, imagine a brown moon. I ain't gonna lie, that would look ugly. A green moon, though? A green moon would be kind of fire, though. I want to see like a green moon one day. We had red moons, right? I'm pretty sure. I don't know the moon phases. I don't. But imagine just a green moon shows up. Like, damn, bro, that'd be crazy. That'd be crazy. But I don't really see the green on here, though. I don't know where they get the green from.
Drew closer to the moon, they started crossing the boundary that separates the near side from the far side. That transition is marked by a large impact crater known as the Orientale Basin. It's 600 miles wide and 3.8 billion years old.
Damn!
Artemis II was the first time people have ever seen the entire thing.
What?
As the spacecraft rounds over Orientale, the far side of the moon begins to reveal itself. This is our moon like you have never seen it before. People often refer to this as the dark side, but it gets just as much sun as any other place on the moon.
Hell?
The weird part about it is that this side always faces away from us on Earth, so we've only ever seen the whole thing through satellite images. The first thing that you'll notice is it's a much lighter region. There are none of those big dark spots that we associate with the face of the moon. Those are ancient volcanic lakes that filled up with lava rock billions of years ago when the moon was forming. So we know that for...
What you mean lava rocks? There was lava in the moon before? Really? I didn't know that.
some reason the volcanoes were concentrated on the Earth-facing side, but we don't know why that is. This is one of the mysteries that the Artemis program is hoping to solve. So with the absence of any volcanic activity to smooth it out, the far side of the moon is marked by heavy cratering. You can see that most clearly in images that the crew photographed along the terminator line. That's the transition from night to day. And through here, the low angle of the sunlight creates a super high contrast between dark shadowed lowlands and brightly lit highlands. The crew noted in their remarks during this time that the surface of the moon is nowhere near as flat as it appeared from a distance. There are actually tall peaks and steep cliffs around these impact craters, making for a rough and complex geography. One of the areas that they were able to see as the spacecraft circled around the far side was the South Bull Aitken Basin. This is where NASA wants to land future Artemis missions with crew on board and eventually build a permanent outpost on the moon. We can see pretty clearly from these observations that the Artemis landings will be nothing like the old Apollo missions. Those touched down on the flat volcanic plains of the equator region on the near side, while the terrain for Artemis will be so much more rugged and challenging to navigate. Turning their attention back toward home, the crew were able to witness another unique phenomenon. Not a sunset, but an Earthset, as our planet begins to dip down below the horizon of the moon.
Bro, these images are crazy, dog.
The horizon of
this really looks like, honestly, like a Photoshop picture, but if this is real, man, like, wow. That's incredible, man.
The moon. It's around this point that Integrity loses contact with the Earth. That's not a problem, it's just an unfortunate effect of using laser-based communications. Once the moon passes in between the ship and the Earth, the line of communication is broken. So for a period of about 40 minutes, these four people were totally unreachable.
Damn.
As they came back into communication range, they witnessed an Earthrise, an image that was made famous by the crew of Apollo 8 when they captured this photograph on Christmas Eve in 1968.
What the
And now,
fuck?
we have our own version of the Earthrise for our own generation.
That's gonna be crazy, bro. Y'all gotta think about it. These pictures are gonna be in future science books. Like, science books. Like, I remember seeing, like, certain pictures during science on the science book, and we learned about the lunar phases and, like, the galaxy and the planets and stuff like that. And I don't know, I kind of don't remember these pictures, but I can just imagine in the future generations, these pictures are gonna be on science books, man, for kids to learn. And like, they're real pictures.
From this point on, Integrity is now moving away from the moon and back toward home. Later that evening, they witnessed yet another sight that no human eye had seen before. A total eclipse of the sun from the far side of the moon. So typically when we see an eclipse, the sun and moon appear almost exactly the same size. But from out here, the moon appears much bigger than the sun.
That's so fire!
The eclipse to last nearly 54 minutes and allowed the crew to capture photographs of the moon with the stars and planets in the background.
Yo, I ain't gonna lie, man.
In the background.
Look at this, bro. The moon blocking the sun, the stars around the galaxy. Wow, man. Hey, this crew did a lot of history, to be honest. They discovered a lot of things. I still wonder what camera they used. Like, was it a Sony camera? Was it a Canon camera? I don't know.
So, for any of your moon landing conspiracy friends who ask why you can't see stars from the moon, it's because the sun was out every other time we went there. When the sun goes away, the stars come out, just like on Earth.
Nice.
The day ended with a congratulatory phone call to the crew from President Trump and NASA leadership, while preparations were made to bring them home on the final leg of the journey. Another 4 days before they reach the Earth's atmosphere and begin the most dangerous phase of the mission. Re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere is a complicated maneuver. The capsule has to hit at just the right angle to cut through. If it comes in too shallow, then it'll actually bounce off and go flying back up into space.
What?
If the angle is too steep, then the capsule builds up too much resistance too fast and overheats. So NASA takes a lot of care with guiding Integrity in for its final descent. This is done using maneuvering thrusters on the service module. Now, once everything is lined up for re-entry, a lot of stuff begins to happen in a relatively short time. About 20 minutes before reaching the atmosphere, pyrotechnic charges fire and separate the Integrity capsule from the service module. The crew doesn't need it anymore, and the service module will safely burn up as it re-enters. Once separated, the Integrity capsule fires up its own maneuvering thrusters to perform a flip and gets its heat shield pointing down into the direction of travel. As the capsule falls down through the upper atmosphere, the Earth's gravity begins to pull harder, and it accelerates to a top speed of about 32 times the speed of sound.
Wow.
At this velocity, the capsule begins slamming into the first air molecules, which are still very thin at this altitude, but there's enough atmosphere to begin the heating process. As we see the first sign of flames begin to light up outside the capsule window, communications with the crew go dead.
Oh,
the energy
right.
from the spacecraft compresses the molecules in the atmosphere.
Okay, I ain't gonna lie. I did watch when they were, coming back down to Earth. I did see that. I saw that on the NASA channel on YouTube. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, they lost communication for like 6-7 minutes around there, 8 minutes, something like that.
So violently that they explode into a state of matter called plasma. Not
Wow.
only is this plasma super hot, between 4,000 and 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, but it's also so energized that it begins to conduct electricity. The electric charge is what disrupts communications between the crew and the ground team. It's like flying inside a lightning storm.
Wow.
This continues for 6 whole minutes until wind resistance has slowed the capsule down enough that it's no longer creating a plasma field. That force of deceleration has an effect of about 4G on the astronauts inside, the equivalent of about 4 times Earth's gravity.
Damn.
And this is the point where NASA regains communication with Integrity, and the world is
So I told y'all 6 minutes without communication with the team. I remember that.
relieved to hear that all is well with the crew on board.
Yes.
From here, it's a few more minutes of free falling as the first cameras begin to track Integrity on its descent. At an altitude of around 5,000
And
feet,
I've seen
the
this
main
too.
parachutes finally deploy, and the capsule slows down to a gentle 19 miles per hour for the final coast phase. It's 5:07 p.m. local time off the coast of San Diego, California.
They
when
land.
Integrity makes their official splashdown into the Pacific Ocean, completing a 10-day journey that covered a total of 695,000
Wow.
miles from the Earth to the moon and back again. Once they are floating in the water, the capsule deploys 5 red helium balloons from the nose. Those
Why?
are just to make sure it doesn't tip over.
Oh,
Although
okay.
conditions on landing are pretty calm, at least as far as the Pacific Ocean goes, with waves peaking at about 4 feet high. There's only one minor issue post-splashdown, and that's with the communications between the astronauts and their recovery crew.
Yes, I remember that. They took a while for them to start communicating with each other. Like, once they landed, they lost communication, and they were there stranded in the ocean for a few minutes. It kind of had me a little worried, to be honest, but luckily they were able to gain communication between each other, and they got sent to the Navy ship, right?
Commander Reed Wiseman reports that he can hear the rescuers, but they can't hear him.
Right,
So
right.
that results in a little bit of a delay with recovery boats circling around the capsule and waiting for instructions. But eventually, the first boat moves in and they open the hatch on the capsule from the outside, giving our crew their first breath of fresh, non-recycled air since last Wednesday afternoon. 4 Navy officers from the recovery boat hop into the capsule and begin to assess each astronaut, help them with getting out of their harness and space helmet and getting set for the main recovery operation. They attach a big inflatable raft to the capsule underneath the open hatch that's nicknamed the front porch, and one by one, the crew leave their capsule and drop onto the porch where they wait for a line to come down from a recovery helicopter. There are 2 choppers running 1 astronaut at a time, picking them up from the porch and dropping them onto the deck of a Navy ship waiting nearby. From there, they go straight down to the ship's medical bay for a full examination. All signs throughout the landing and recovery operation pointed to all 4 astronauts being in good health. But
hey, thank God, nothing bad happened with them. That's God right there, man. Good thing, man. Good thing they landed, nothing happened. They were healthy, and everything went smoothly.
will continue to be monitored out of an abundance of caution. And that concludes the most important human spaceflight mission of the 21st century. The first crewed moon mission in my lifetime, but certainly not the last.
Hey, in my lifetime too. Yeah, I'm in my mid-20s. Damn, bro. This was something historic for me, you know what I'm saying? I think it was just historic in general, but wow. This was crazy.
A proper beginning for a new space race and the era of human beings expanding our civilization to the moon and beyond.
What's this? How China built a city on the moon? Yeah. Y'all know USA about to do something about that. Y'all know USA, bro. They got a huge ego, so if China builds the city, bro, USA gonna build a country in the moon or something like that. Y'all know USA always be one upping, but hey, that's another topic. So that's the end of this video. I'm gonna give it a like, y'all. It was very informative. Man. Now I knew that they weren't gonna land on the moon. That's actually for the next mission, I believe. For the next Artemis mission, that they're gonna be landing on the moon. But this itself, like, it's great, man. This is great. Like, wow, it was a historic moment. Haven't visited the moon in over 50 years. First time seeing it in my lifetime. You know, it's great, man. And this day was a good day for America in general, like for the USA. It was a very good day. And like I said, thank God that the astronauts and the crew landed safely. Nothing bad happened. You know what I'm saying? They took great pictures and they brought a lot of information, I believe, you know what I'm saying? So, hey, man, it seems like it was very good and everything went smoothly. So we're just gonna have to wait until the next mission. I don't know when it's gonna be in the next few years. I'm not too sure, but anyways, we made a step. It was still historic, and yeah, man, it was a great day. I remember, like I said, seeing this live on the NASA channel when they were landing onto the surface of Earth and landed on the ocean in San Diego. It was a great moment, but yeah, very informative, and we'll see what happens in the next few years. Anyways, y'all, I appreciate y'all tuning in. Make sure y'all like and subscribe. Go ahead and comment. Let me know what you think of this video. Let me know what videos you want to see me react to next. Once again, I appreciate y'all tuning in, and I'll see you on the next time. See ya!